a single page application development framework, and it, it, it enhances the custom tags that are available through HTML. So HTML gives us tags like head, h1, href, and body, and other tags. And HTML is hypertext markup language. So it's a type of markup language, but then markup language, it has a specific intention of assigning meaning to data. Hypertext markup language, they have an intention of controlling what that data is going to appear in the browser. So they are not as much about data, they are more about how it should be rendered on the screen. Angular, it improves, it gives power to HTML tags by creating custom HTML tags, and these tags then they start fitting together and the applications start making more sense from the code perspective. There are there are four elements to an Angular application: component, template, directive, and dependency injection. Component has three parts to it. The first is template. Second is a class, a backend class, and a set of metadata. Now, a template is going to contain native HTML elements, and it's going to define what that element is going to look inside the screen. It is also going to give you an option of binding. So along with the HTML, it is also going to show us how to do different type of binding. There are four types of binding. We are going to look at that very shortly. Then there are directives. Directives, they are special instructions. They can appear at multiple places. One place is controlling the UI of the element, but then using directives, you can also create. You can also control data transfer between the backend component and the UI element. Dependency injection is the same concept as any object-oriented programming's DI concept, where you inject an object from the outside into a component. It is generally reserved for non-UI activity, and they are called services. Then we compared JavaScript with TypeScript, and we identified that JavaScript is a dynamically typed language, and the data type is a little flexible. TypeScript is kind of a syntactic sugar on JavaScript. So all the valid JavaScript file, they are valid TypeScript file as well. But then the power of TypeScript lies in defining or assigning data type to its variables. Once you define these variables, as you access it across in your application, if you violate type rules or static typing rules, it is going to give a compile time error. It is not going to stop from transpiling the erroneous TypeScript to be converted to JavaScript. And we saw example of on the official of that on the official play area of TypeScript language website. Angular itself is written using TypeScript. Right. With that, we jumped to the console, and in console we used npm and created the Angular application. Now npm itself is available through Node.js. We went ahead and installed Node.js. I already had Node.js installed, so I updated it. With Node.js installed on your computer, you're going to get a special program, which is Node Package Manager. Um, Using Node Package Manager, you can install multiple tools and libraries available on the Package Manager site. Angular is available on Node as well, and we installed the Angular CLI. Now, the CLI itself is going to give you a command called ng, and using ng, you can interact or you can create the Angular solution. We saw multiple commands. We used the new command for creating a new workspace. This new workspace, it created multiple files like the package.json and angular.json, along with the default application module and component and templates of it. To create a new component, you're going to use the generate option. Using generate, you can generate different modules, components, services, and directives. So everything that are the building blocks of an Angular application, they can be generated using this command here. You can either type the full command or you can use a short letter for it. So generate G is for generate. So either you can pass generate or G to the CLI, and it's going to generate the appropriate application. Then we ran into some issues. Um, so I created the application, but then in between we started seeing an error message. The error message was because of the npm version. We went ahead and updated Node, and it helped us solve the npm error. And then we saw other error because of Angular and the way that project was set up. We created a new directory and went on creating the Angular solution using the ng CLI. We saw multiple options. -force is going to override everything. -defaults is going to use all the default option like the styling template to CSS, and probably no routing. That is also another default behavior. -prefix, there is a default value to prefix, but then you can influence that depending on what module you are in or what client you are building it for. You might want to provide an option for this as well. There is another option called -flat. All right, and that option, so the ng new part. So -flat is going to leave all the components at the same level, and it's going to have a flat folder structure hierarchy. Using ng generate, we can generate all of this. We have already generated component. You can generate a service as well. We are going to see an example of service today. So all right, so -flat is not part of the ng new command. It is part of the ng generate command. Right, this generate is going to put all the files in the same folder structure, and it is not going to create more files. Then we added additional component product to our existing application, and then it went ahead and created a folder product, added a component TypeScript file, and it updated the module.ts file. So with that, let's go back to our VS Code solution. All right. So we have package.json file. There are three important sections to it: the script section, dependencies section, and dev dependencies. These are only required for development. They are not required for production package. The libraries here, they are required for production, and that's why they are in the dependency section. There's a script section. The keys on the left, they become parameter to the npm command. And if I'm so sorry, the node command, and if I type node start, it is going to generate this. It's going to execute this command here. The -o option with ngserve is going to open up the browser as soon as the build is complete. And that's why we added that option here. The watch command is going to monitor any, okay, so ngserve is going to monitor all the changes to the folder structure that we are doing. It is going to compile and it's going to refresh the UI as well. The angular.json is does not make it an Angular project. It is just the configuration that we want to apply for the Angular project. And we saw a couple of options like ngserve. It has two modes, one for production, one for development. You can study this file more closely. There are two more important files like index.html. It has the default HTML code, and it has the entry point for the root component in the root module. Notice that it does not have any script tag, right? But when you execute this application, you will notice that there is a script tag that dynamically get added at the end of the body or before the body ends, and it then wires up all the Angular code. Right. This is the main selector, a new custom element that we added through the ng generate command. The main.ts file, it has the import statement. We are importing a few classes, a few functions, modules, services from the Angular library, which is the core library. Then the browser dynamic is another library that we imported. And then we imported a couple of our custom code as well, which is sitting in the app folder, right? We checked if it is the production mode. This production mode can be controlled from the angular.json file. Once that is defined, we call the bootstrap module function, and then we pass it the application module. Now, this is the convention that the root module or the entry module of any Angular application is called app module. Probably you can influence that by going to by changing package.json or angular.json file, but then I would leave it alone and call it app module. Then we saw the export keyword. That export keyword exposes it to the outside world, and then we saw decorators. This is the TypeScript concept. You put the @ sign and a function call. This function call is going to decorate this particular class. To create a module, you will have to decorate a class with @ng module. This is going to take an object literal, a JSON object as a parameter, and that parameter is going to have at least 4 or 5 different members like declarations. So a module is a container of the components that are present inside it. If you define a component here, it does not automatically include it alongside that particular module unless you specify it in declarations. Now, there are two types of import statement that we are seeing here. The first 5 lines or the first 5 import statements in this file, they are coming from JavaScript. Right? This is a JavaScript syntax of referring to a specific library, and from this library, importing a specific class or directive. Right? So in this case, we are importing an interface. Probably browser module is a class, right? So we are going to use these libraries and we are going to import interfaces and different classes and directives and services. But then the import statement here itself, it corresponds to the JavaScript syntax. The import that we see here, the second import on this page, it is an Angular syntax. So if you want a module to include different module, you will have to put an import statement over here like this. This is how Angular wires up different components, different modules together and creates one big application. Now, a module is a container of components, and it also specifies how to do dependency injection through providers and how to create that first component that is going to create the UI. And that part always goes in the Bootstrap section. This For a simple project, you will only have one app module and only one Bootstrap statement. But then as your application grows, you are going to define multiple modules based on the feature of the application, right? So suppose you are building a complex e-commerce application, you're going to have a root module here, like app module, which is going to have multiple import statement for different module. And then those modules themselves can have their own Bootstrap statement with one component specified in it. Okay, the components that you are listing here, you will have to import them using the JavaScript syntax, and that's when you will be able to reference them in this particular object literal syntax here. Okay, then let's look at the app component syntax or the app component TypeScript file. The way we decorated the module with @ng module, we're going to decorate the component with @component. And once again, we're going to have to import it using this JavaScript syntax, and we'll pass it an object literal. This literal is going to define the selector for this component, the template. The template could be another file, or if it is a small thing, if it's a small HTML element, you can define it inside inline here with the template keyword and using HTML code in the backticks. Right? I'm going to undo that. Style URLs is a collection. So you will have to put it inside square brackets, and all the CSS file that you want included for that particular style or all the styling that you want to apply to that UI, you're going to mention it over here. Right? Then we saw a very quick example of a data binding. We defined a member inside the app component and we assigned a default value to it. Now, if we go to the app component.html, I can use the double curly braces syntax and put title over here. Now this title is going to get is bound to this member here, right? So whatever value we assign here inside the TypeScript file, when the UI renders, this value will appear on the screen. Then we so we had some default code here, which was HTML. We replaced this with another component, and this is once again going back to the theory of Angular that HTML by itself is um, for the browser, for passing data to the browser for rendering. But then when we are building application, we want to see different tags that are more native, that are more connected to our application and our terminology. Because we wanted to display a product information, we created a new component. That component is going to generate the UI inside it, and it is going to get replaced here. But then the HTML file itself that we are creating is going to contain objects in this order. And that discussion goes back to the atomic design discussion that we have had. So there's Atom, which is the smallest unbreakable unit, like button and input text boxes and labels. We combine these different atoms and create a molecule, such as a login button, such as a login component, probably a sign-in functionality, probably a search functionality. These different components, they combine together, they create an organism. This is where we stop with the chemistry terminology. We combine multiple organisms and we create a template probably for a search page, a template for, say, product listing page, right? And then in a page, we have multiple such templates. And probably this section here is going to be search. This section here is going to be navigation. And the main section itself is going to have different elements, different style of template that is going to do a specific activity. Right. Then we did not see an example of route outlet. We are going to see that very shortly. We used ng generate component command and we generated this component. This component once again had the same structure, another HTML file and analytics. So I'm going to delete this. This is from yesterday. All right, let's go ahead and so we already saw what components are. And I don't like how we are hard coding and putting multiple lines here. So we're going to change that. I want to pass information about the product from this component onto the UI. And as the UI is generating, I am going to refer the data that I have defined here. Now, we saw one example yesterday of an interface when we were talking about the template pattern. If I want to pass on data, I can define them inside these members like this. If I want an ID property here, I can define ID as a number, and the product is going to have, say, a name. Name is a string, and probably it is going to have a price, and price once again is, I don't know if there's a type decimal in TypeScript. Then probably once again I'm going to call it number. Right? We are not going to define any values because this is an interface, and in the component itself, I am going to define a collection of product. Now, once again, we'll have to use the let keyword. Then the variable name, I'm going to call it products. This products is going to have a data type. And for collection, I'll have to put square brackets here. And then I have an option of initializing those products here. And a semicolon. Probably no let keyword here. All right, so what is the error? Give me 1 second. might have to change this to square brackets. All right, sorry about that. And over here, now I can do new product. This could be because okay, right. All right, because it's a variable, I'll have to initialize it. Right, give me 1 second, guys. I'm going to change this back to interface. And over here, I'm going to define ID. So the syntax, it has to match let me just call it iProduct. This is iProduct collection. And I'm not seeing the error message. Let me go ahead and close out of this folder and open it again. So I'm going to open the C drive. All right, and nothing changed. It seems to be working correct. Let me go ahead and declare a single object here first. So I'm just going to say product colon my product assigned to the syntax. And I don't know if there's a let keyword needed. Implement interface on init. Okay. I'm completely clueless about what is happening because so let's go ahead and start with something very simple. I'm going to call, say, message as string. I'm going to assign to hello. Then let's go ahead and define products. And products, they are collection of the interface iProduct. And probably I'll have to initialize it to null. And that's when so iProduct. I don't know why this statement is giving error specifically. Let me see if I can move it to a new file. So I use the application features. Now that it has an export statement, I can go ahead and reference that file. Okay, so the import statement is already added, and this error is still here. Right, so probably it was giving errors because the object wasn't complete. I can add a couple of other products. like full stack development, backend dev, front end dev, and I'm going to get rid of this single line, right? And let's bump up the price of all these three. I'm going to change this to just to be logical. I'm going to assign ID2 and ID3 over here, right? And I'm going to call it products. Okay, so we've defined some inline data in the component, and now let's go ahead and bind this data to the UI element that we are creating. So on the HTML side, I'm going to get rid of this div section, and over here I'm going to define an h2 tag, and let's see in our component if we have any specific property. Let's just call it all the products, right? Then we're going to say some message list of all the products. And over here, we're going to use a special syntax this time. So for UL, I'm going to do li. And because we want to generate the name of product, I'm going to use a for loop of Angular. And then I'm going to explain what this asterisk here means. And ng-for is a type of directive. If I want to loop through the product component, just 1 second. All right. So if I want to loop through this product component, this collection here, I will have to write a for each like syntax, which is going to which is going to select an individual product. And then instead of from, we're going to write off here. All right. This off is very tricky. Make sure that you get it right. And then you're going to mention the collection name here. So this products actually point to or refer this particular member here. Now, we already know that the double curly brace, it creates a binding between two this thing. So I can put product ID here, and I can do that once again, product dot name, and last time for the product price, product dot price. And now if I run this application, I'm going to do view terminal and then type npm start. So this asterisk here, it indicates that the UI that we are going to generate, it has ability of all right. So it has an ability of adding and removing HTML elements from the screen. So if at any time you are going to do template modification, DOM manipulation, and it has a you want to give it ability of removing HTML from the DOM or adding to it, you will have to use this asterisk keyword. Very important. Now let's look at the error message. It is saying that iProduct is not available. So we saw similar error messages yesterday as well, and they got resolved without me doing anything. Component.ts is not a module. The syntax is fine. If I do F12, it takes me to that definition. I am going to cut it, get rid of this statement, and just add it here. Right, so with this added, now if we go to the UI and refresh the page, right, notice that it is printing full stack development. This is coming from the root component, and then products. This is the h2 tag. This is the paragraph tag, and we are seeing three UL element. Probably they are better rendered inside a table. So probably you can make that change yourself as well, but table tr, and then we want three TDs, and inside these three TDs, we are going to put these IDs here. And for generating multiple rows, once again, I'm going to copy the ng-for part, and I'm going to make it part of the row selection here. And if you want some form of heading, you can do the head. And inside t head, once again, you can have three TD elements, probably three TH elements. And we can modify it with ID, name, and price. And as I hit the save button, the UI is going to refresh. And because we don't have any styling, it is not coming out clean. But now it's a table information. So the ng-for statement is going to pick up a collection on the left. It's going to pick up one item, assign it to this member here. The keyword here is of. You declare product, and inside product, you are going to assign these values in this element. But what if the product collection is empty? So instead of these three values here, if I just comment this part out and mention products as iProduct collection and assign it to an empty collection, right? We still get that empty table. We don't want any table when there is no UI element. And then for that, you can use another ngIf statement and set it to products. Let me go ahead and change this to null. All right, so null probably is not allowed. Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and change this selector here too. So there's a selector clause. If it evaluates to false, it does not generate any UI element, right? So all we have to do is we have to figure out a condition that we can put in the ngIf statement. And with ngIf, if this expression evaluates to a false, it is not going to generate any value. And then let me show you another example of doing that. So let's go ahead and add a value here, and we're going to call it display. You're going to set it to Boolean and assign it value true at the moment. But we can do products dot length equal to 0 question mark. If it is 0, then you assign false or you assign true to it. And we can have this display expression mentioned here like this. And then this products. I don't know, some TypeScript syntax. Let me just go ahead and delete this code. Why is products failing? Cannot find products. Then just define right here. All right, I have to mention this here. All right, so with this defined, now I can take this condition expression and mention the condition here. And with that, we are once again going to see the same behavior. The table itself is not generated because this condition evaluated to false. So you can do some backend calculation in the component code itself. Um, and once you have that, once you have those parameters identified, you can generate UI at based on the data that you have inside your component code. Another thing that we know that price is a currency value, but what we are seeing here on the screen, it is not very clear. So there's a special syntax in Angular using which you can control how you want it to appear. And then if I put a pipe symbol here and mention currency, and if you go back to the screen, it is displaying value in the currency format, right? So this is a special uh, sorry. So these are called pipes, and these pipe let you pick up an input value and then apply some form of transformation to it. And then after this transformation, we are going to see a new value. So the general syntax is this, that you start with the interpolation expression. You provide an expression that is going to be the beginning. Once you have this value, you use the pipe symbol. And then after pipe, you can convert it to, you can transform the value that is coming from the left side of the expression, and you can transform it to a different format. Now, there are uh, there are other pipes also available. So look at the screen here that everything is in the title case now. There is a pipe called uppercase. If I provide this pipe, notice that the screen transformed to everything to the upper letters. Right. Let's go ahead and let me show you a couple more examples. All right, it is perfectly all right to put those expression directly here. If I, okay, let's go ahead and add a member for date. I'm going to assign today as date assigned to, I don't know if it is going to take that date format. String is not a date. So I can do date like this. And then that is today. So if I take this member here now and apply another transformation like date, the data here is going to appear in this format. But then you can pass different parameters to this like full date, and it'll show you with the day. So there are different values that you can pass, and like short time, and it is only going to pick up the time value. So it is doing date time right now on the new data object, and it is applying different transformations through this pipe concept. All right. So what we have seen so far is only one way of data binding, that we are generating data on the class side, and then we are consuming that data inside inside the UI using either interpolation or through currencies or through different directives like ngf and ngfor. They're called structural directive, and structural directive require the asterisk sign. Now, if you want to pass data from the UI, which is probably say a user input, back to the component class, we'll have to use another type of binding, and it is called model binding. So if you define the type here as text, I'm going to give it an ID. I'm going to say product name. And there is a special syntax. It is called the banana expression. So you put parentheses inside square bracket. So this is the banana and this is the box here, the square bracket. Inside this, you always mention ng model. And to this ng model, you can assign a member that you will have to define in the component class. So over here, I'm going to say new product. And it is not able to find this new product definition. So I'm going to go ahead and add it to our member. And this probably should resolve it. All right, so for this thing to work, I will have to add a couple of extra binding statements. So let me go ahead and add that now. So because we are using ng model, we have to add another component. So it's part of the ng forms element. And with this added, right, I'm not sure why this is not working, but with ng model, you get two-way binding. So the member name that you put here, you can define that member here, and it then extracts the information from the UI and makes it part of the screen here. So I'm going to comment this code out, and I'm going to show you another example. When you want to handle
push button system, right?
Right. So when you want to bind a specific element, a specific event, so that event, it can be bound to a function, and then that function name is called, say, if I call it handler, we can define the handler in the component class as a function, and handler does not return anything. Right. So I can define the handler function here like this, and in this function I can do console.log, say inside button click handler. And now if I go back to the code, because I did not give any text to the button, it is appearing pretty small. Let me go ahead and add that. Give some body to that button. Right. Now if I click this button and look at the console, it's going to say inside button click handler. So there are four type of binding that can happen on a page. Number one, interpolation. Number two, event handling. Number three, for the custom directives. through the members. And number 4 is two-way binding, where we read input value from the screen and assign it to the UI elements. All right. So with that, it is already 9 o'clock. Let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to see services and how to inject services in Angular. Right. Thank you.
Zia, you are mute.
All right. I'm so sorry. So if so what part did you guys miss? Should I start again?
Yeah.
All right. So before we went on break, we saw that inside these classes we can define members, and these members, they are accessible in the UI side. They can be bound using the interpolation operator. They can be bound using the directives. These are structural directives because they're going to modify the composition of the HTML page. Then we saw example of pipe. We saw example of event handlers, and we saw example of ng model, which is a two-way binding. It is going to send data from the UI onto the component class, but this is not working for us. So I'm not going to bother. I'm going to leave it as is. We know that there is a button. We know that there's a button, and if we add a disabled attribute to this button, it'll be disabled. But to provide disabled attributes or attributes like this inside inside Angular has a little trick that we add a disabled attribute and we put it inside the square brackets. Now we can do very similar thing for the image attribute. If we want to control the image source from the server side, we are going to set it to source value, and we can create a variable called image src. And this image src, it can become a member here of type string, and we can assign some random path to this. So suppose we have the asset folder already. So inside asset, there's a favorite icon. There's an Angular icon somewhere. So I don't know where that icon is coming from, but then you can point it to one of those assets and images, and the image control is going to get bound because we don't have that image defined. Right, it is not coming, but this is how you bind specific properties of the elements with this side product. Right, this is how you can bind specific properties or specific attributes of these HTML elements. So you put them in square brackets and then you can assign values to them. I'm going to show you an example of HTML routing. Uh, Basic concepts, components, directives. All right. So for routing to work, we'll require multiple components in our application. And we have already seen that using ng generate component, we can generate new components inside the application. So I'm going to say ng generate component, and I'm going to call it new page, probably call it second product. And then once again, they become part of the app module. So if I hit enter, once again, we're going to see two lines, that creating a component and updating a component. So create and update, two file got modified. If we come back to our HTML code, let me close out all of these files and I'm not going to save that. This is the second product component that got added, and it has its own component.ts file. Because it's a there is inline templating, there is no HTML assigned at the moment. Now, to add this component to route, we'll have to do some basic changes to our application module. So let's come back to the app module, src, inside app, the module.ts file. Notice that it added the import statement. In the declaration, it added the second component. We'll have to import a new component, and that is for routing. So the import statement itself is going to look like routes. And if I hit tab, it is going to contain the rest of the line. And I can also import a route module here. It is router module actually, right? So with this included, now I can define the collection of routes that I want in my application. Now const is a valid TypeScript syntax. I can define a routes collection over here. Right, so this route is defined now. Now we have to add different values to this route collection. Because we know that we have two elements, let's go to the definition of this routes. If I hit F12, you're going to see that routes itself is a collection of route. If I hit F12 again, I'm going to see multiple parameters. The first is the path parameter. Second is path matcher, and component. All right, and component itself is of type any. Okay, you can do redirection, you can do outlets, you can see there's an option of can activate. It is going to apply, it's going to help you apply guarding on the component. So if you don't want a specific page to be accessible by, say, users that are not signed in, you can provide the can activate functionality there. And this functionality is going to decide if that page can be browsed or not. You can pass data, you can resolve it, you can have children, right? So like nested routing, that is all possible. We are going to keep our example extremely simple. We are going to say path, and we're going to say product, and we're going to mention the component name itself as compo NENT, and I'm going to use the product component. This is a comma actually. Make sense? Now for the second component, I can repeat this line and put a comma here. So that's going to make it a collection. And over here, I'm going to say second, and I'm going to point it to the second product component. So with these two added, now I will have to generate the UI for this particular page. So I'm going to come to the app module.html, and instead of this product here, I'm going to get rid of this, and I'm going to add the navigation. And because I know that there are two elements that we need, not LLI, LI, and then inside both these elements, I need an anchor tag. So I'm going to do anchor. Then there's an attribute called route link, custom attribute specific to JavaScript, and I'm going to say product. So it's going to take the attribute and then route link active. I'm going to set that to active as well. And then inside the element, I'm going to say product here. Then I'm going to change the second line to second and this product to second. So in the path, we have defined product and second. This thing has to match with this section here. And with that defined, Angular is going to go ahead and generate two links for us. And to make them hyperlinks, right, I was So I was hoping that these two, they are going to appear as the element. I am definitely missing something in the syntax. All right, so I have not yet defined at least one thing. I have to add another statement in the app module, and probably it is the imports statement. So inside imports, this, and I have to define router module dot for root, and I have to link it to this root collection. Because we don't do that, the route module was not taking effect. And probably now it should work. And there should be an exports as well. So it is some combination of these. All right, let me jump to this module here. And okay, so because we've used routing from Angular, the code that I have added to module, I should have actually added this to this collection here, right? And for these to work, I'm going to use the quick tip and import the required libraries, and this root here, I'm going to assign to root, and now probably it is going to work. I'm going to go do a little cleanup here. I don't want this. And with that added, I can get rid of this statement here. Number one, number two, I can get rid of this statement as well. Probably nothing to export. And so probably my selectors are not right. So I might have to give CS prod here. Number one, for the second component, I might have to give CS second product. In the routing module, we're going to replace that. All right. All right, I've no clue why this thing is not working. I was assuming that this becomes the path. And then this is router link. It's a wrong attribute. And with the attribute corrected, now if I hit the page, notice that, okay, so probably this link is wrong. I might have to correct in the app routing module.ts, I'll have to point to the second component, which seems correct. All right, but notice that as we are clicking on these buttons, okay, asset image is not present. That's why it is crashing. Or the second crash reason is the URL segment second cannot match any root second. Let me go back and right, because we are using second hyphen product in the path and what we are using in the app component.ts is slash second. It is not going to find that. If we match those two, it is going to work. And this is very important rule that, I mean, your style should match number one, but you can define other routing statements like when you don't know that if the path is going to match. So all the other pages, they are going to fall back to the second component. Right. So if a URL doesn't, if it doesn't match, you can put double asterisk here, and double asterisk is going to become the catch-all page. And probably you can create another component and call it page not found component. Right. And once you create that, you can assign it to page not found component. And because I gave component in the name, it is going to have component twice. So I'm going to leave it alone. And to this, I'm going to say second product. Now, if we don't have to correct our URL, I can leave it to second product, but then we are going to see the page not found page. So if I come here now, go to second, we are going to say second product working now. Okay, funny. So because the root link is corrected, if I go to a page that is not present, it is going to say page not found component. All right. So if I correct the URL, it is going to work, and you don't have to have it inside hyperlink because hyperlink is like a logical attribute. Combination of these two attributes inside any element is going to work just fine. I've never tried it. Let's go ahead and give it a shot. A paragraph as link. Right now we see a paragraph as link. If I click on this, I'm going to go to the second product page. Right. So these two attributes on any element, they become a navigatable property. And then once you click on this, you can go to the page present here. So on the product page, we are here. On the second page, we go to the second page and notice that there's a URL change, right? And there is no post back. So not the entire page is refreshing, only the part where we have this defined router outlet. Only this part is going to get replaced. Make sense? So you're going to have a couple of links. You're going to have a router outlet tag added, and based on this combination, this particular element is going to get replaced in the page. Right. So with that, let's move on to the next topic, which is services. So a service is anything that has nothing to do with UI element. And once a service that we probably can create inside our application is data extraction. So right now we are doing data extraction in line. We don't want to do this because component, it should have only one objective of feeding data to the UI element and creating handlers and the one-way, two-way binding with the UI elements over here. Right? It should not be burdened, loaded with data extraction itself. And for that, we are going to create a service. Now, to create a service, once again, you can go back to ng generate service, and I'm going to do hyphen help. And it is going to print the schematics, the name, and then once again, we have the same option of hyphen force, hyphen flat. So let's go ahead and generate a service, ng generate service. And once again, the syntax is that you don't put the service name. So I'm going to leave it to service, and you can probably give this thing prefix. The prefix is part of that. I'm going to leave it at this and hit enter. Right, so it created a service and it added to app product service.ts. Let's come to our Visual Studio. And we're going to see a product service over here. It is a service.ts. And this time we don't have @component or @ng module or directive. We have @injectable. And there is a special attribute called provided in, and it is provided in the root component. So the root component of application is going to make sure that product service, it gets injected into components where it is required. Right now, to consume a service, we are going to go to the component, and in the constructor, just like we did it for .NET, we are going to provide the value here. Now, the variable name itself is on the left, service, and I'm going to call product service. And I might have to add an import statement for this. So with this import statement added, the service is available to us. Now, this service needs to be saved to a local variable. Once again, I can define it using service and underscore service. OK, so it is TypeScript, and we'll have to use it this way and probably set it to null in the beginning. Right? This syntax is not working definitely, but type null is not present. I think I'll have to set it to undefined. Or probably I'm just going to leave this line as is. And there's a syntax. I was planning to initialize the underscore service to this service here. Right? But then TypeScript offers an easier syntax. And if you just mention private keyword here, this service, it takes the scope of the class. And now I can access the service member over here. The service dot, and then you can call the method on the service itself. For now, our service itself is empty. I can create a variable here called get products, and this product is going to return the iProduct interface, like so, iProduct collection, and in here I'll have to return that collection that we initialized here. So with this, I can get rid of this statement and paste it here. Probably I can return this. And element access expression should take All right, let me define that function once again. And then I'm going to say return underscore products. I don't know, let me define it here. And then let me change this to this dot products. I'm going to get rid of this as well. And this statement as well. I'm going to change this to this dot products. All right, so I'm defining it at the class level. I have a feeling that I should be able to define it inside this function as well. But with this defined, with these variables initialized and being returned, we have the get product service available. We might run into some circular references. So I'm going to cut this thing from here and make it part of the service itself. I'm going to delete this import statement, add product here. With this added, with this service defined, and with this service injected into the constructor of our component, right? We should now be able to call the get product service, and this service is going to give us products. And I don't know if I have to put the let keyword here. And with the let keyword, now the component.ts page is failing. Because products is not available. So I will have to, let me change this to this dot products. I'm going to define products here, like with I as I product collection that is empty in the beginning. It gets initialized here in the handler and gets a value. So go ahead and see this. So our product list is empty at the moment. If I click on this button, it is supposed to hit this handler page. It is printing this message definitely. Once we go inside, I'm not sure if I'm going to see this line. OK, so there are pieces of application that are still remaining. Our binding work is done, but we'll have to inform that this service needs to be injected. And for that, we'll have to configure something at the app module level. So at the component level. OK, I'm trying this. I'm not sure if this is going to work. Inside these packets, I'll have to mention the product service. And with the service added, hopefully. So the button click handler is getting called. So the service is created using this module here. It is injectable. And we'll have to make probably one last change in the ng module part, where in the providers, we'll have to mention the service name, which is product service. And with this product service added, with this reference is added, and now one more try. It is calling the button click handler. Injectable provided in root. All right, I was hoping that this function is going to get called. This is not getting called definitely, but it's not giving it as well. OK, so the get products function is getting called as well. And at least then we should see this product collection getting returned. So let's see where this get products is getting called. inside this. I'm going to change this line from here to inside the constructor. Now we refresh the page. It is calling get products, but then that product collection is not getting assigned to those members. Right? Probably some binding error, but I hope you got the idea that this product is going to get its value from a service. That service is getting injected from the outside, and all the data extraction logic that we have, it is going to go and sit inside that service code itself. Right? This is where you can consume other services and you can connect to web APIs and extract data.